heavy drums, and the essence of a crazy, endless metal era will always be associated with Vinnie Paul. Not only the drummer for Pantera, he was a symbol of courage, defiance, and undying love to music despite the world around him collapsing. Vinnie did more for the band than simply keep time. He had a powerful drumming style, a distinctive double bass style, and the attitude of live loud, die proud. Around the world, he kept millions of fans' pulses pounding. He put a lot of effort into becoming one of the greatest heavy metal musicians of all time, playing alongside celebrities like Dave Lombardo and Lars Ulrich. More than just significant turning points in their career, Pantera's albums, such as Cowboys from Hell, Vulgar Display of Power, and Far Beyond Driven, were significant milestones. They demonstrated Vinnie's true talent and his genuine, hard-working lifestyle. But could his grief over his brother Dimebag Darrell's terrible passing be overshadowed by the spotlight, the alcohol, and the noise of the stage? He passed away quietly and peacefully at the age of 54 from heart disease. He was the life of the party no matter what. Why was the man so cruel? When the final drum beat ceased, what was actually lost? Let's examine the early years of Vinnie Paul. For an entire generation, he was the one who kept the beat. Vinnie Paul was actually a Texas boy who grew up with music and rules, despite his stage persona as a massive, enraged metal monster. He was a peculiar blend of rebellious tendencies and Southern culture. His family had a long history of singing. He was born in Abilene, Texas, on March 11, 1964. Vinnie's dad was Jerry Abbott. Prior to becoming a producer, he worked as a sound engineer and a country singer. Vinnie and his younger brother Darrell Lance Abbott, later known as Dimebag Darrell, began their first jam sessions in the first home studio he constructed for his sons. In that plain house with all the strings and rhythms, Vinnie was initially instructed to play brass instruments, but he soon found himself captivated to the drums and the primitive beat they produced. Vinnie was a very active child who disliked following the rules and loved quick beats and loud noises. Darrell was more interested in guitar technique than Vinnie was in rock drummers like Tommy Aldridge, Kiss, Chris, Alex Van Halen, and Peter. He was inspired to perform with a lot of energy and intensity by these drummers. Surprisingly, Vinnie relied solely on his instincts and feelings to understand everything. He was also quite good at time and rhythm. There was an unbreakable kinship between Vinnie and Darrell from the beginning. They weren't just brothers. They knew each other's every riff and beat, making them artistic soulmates. When they were teenagers, they began performing at local bars where metal fans were shouting, the music was playing all night, and it was dark. In 1981, at the age of 17, Vinnie and Darrell founded Pantera. They initially performed in the well-known glam metal genre of the day. Something wasn't quite right, Vinnie thought. He truly wanted a dark, gritty, angry sound, even with the glittery clothes and makeup. He was discreetly preparing for a transition with his sibling, a true uprising that would alter heavy metal's course. Vinnie Paul's early years were characterized by working in a professional music environment rather than family strife or hardship. His close relationship with his gifted younger brother and his intense passion for drumming helped to mold him into a fighter. He was prepared to engage in combat on the battlefield of the upcoming turbulent and unending years. Pantera and the road. Pantera's fan base wasn't always so large. Blood, sweat, and several nights of unseen labor went into making it. The band was founded in 1981 by Vinnie Paul and his younger brother, Dimebag Darrell. Just two insane teenagers from Texas were performing Van Halen songs at bars. They chased the glam metal fantasy while sporting glossy leather trousers and big hair. Like many other bands, Pantera was a glam metal band in its early years. Although it released 4 independent albums, its popularity was limited to the American South. By that time, Vinnie was already a highly skilled drummer, in charge of the band's collaboration as well as the tempo. The practical head was Vinnie, while the creative heart was Dimebag. He was calm, composed, and unwavering. They were entirely distinct, like two poles of the same current. However, they were dependent on one another. Their relationship as brothers remained constant, despite the fact that the music they performed hadn't really taken off yet. Things began to change in 1987 when Philip Anselmo, Panta's new lead singer, joined the group. The lead singer had been Terrence Lee. It was powerful, untamed, and unadulterated. Vinnie knew as soon as Phil entered. The days of wearing glam metal were over. Panta got heavier, gritty, and angrier after that, losing their glossy 1980s skin. The first band to perform what would later be referred to as groove metal was Panda. Cowboys from Hell was the first film, released in 1990. Vinnie played the drums as if each fill were a blow to the face. To create a sound that no one could ignore, he locked on with razor-sharp riffs on penny bags. However, it wasn't the end. In 1992, Panta transformed into a beast through an obscene display of strength. Vinnie was leading with the drums in addition to playing them. Stroll. The foundations upon which this passion and appetite for violence were based were so firmly established by Vinnie that they were unbreakable. To brag, he didn't have to be quick. He used space, weight, and nearly military-level accuracy to demolish individuals. Grunge was becoming more popular, while thrash metal was disappearing. Vinnie continued metal's harshest reaction, which was Panta. After Driven 1994, Panta wasn't just fighting. They were assuming control. The record immediately peaked at #1 on the Billboard 200, which is nearly unprecedented for a metal band that doesn't compromise in any manner and doesn't have any radio successes. Behind the scenes, Vinnie kept everything running well, from production and sound control to tour scheduling and occasionally even overseeing Phil, who was becoming increasingly addicted and injuring himself. However, as they grew higher, Panta became more fragmented. Phil Anselmo became less frequent at recording sessions and more aloof and erratic. Vinnie couldn't tolerate the lack of control since he was constantly striving for perfection. Not just a bandmate was leaving, but he felt like his entire family was being deceived. Despite Vicky's best efforts, Phil was unable to control himself. The excitement of performing was replaced by large audiences, arduous, months-long tours, and members who grew increasingly antagonistic with one another. Dimag's brother was injured in a battle with the singer he used to collaborate with. Reinventing the Steel, 2000, and The Great Southern Trinkle, 1996, would be Pantera's final albums. The music was loud, even though the band was no longer playing together. Phil became distracted and focused on other projects. In 2003, the band Panda disbanded. There was only fury and bitter silence. No apology, no handshakes. For Vinnie Paul, it was more than just the dissolution of a band. His entire life was coming to an end. Pantera was more than just a place of employment. It was what he and his brother had constructed and done together since they were young children performing music in their father's basement. The split cost him more than just his job. It removed a part of him. Vinnie was unaware, however, that the hardest suffering was still to come. He will always carry a scar from that awful night in his heart. After that, Vinnie would never be the same person. New life and despair. Vinnie Paul essentially left the stage as Pantera broke up in silence and rage. He avoided the media, refused to discuss the band, and returned to his own realm, where ashes were all that remained of a once great metal kingdom. His passion for music, however, remained constant. In 2003, Vinnie and his brother Dimebag Darrell decided to make a fresh start. They would form a brand new band named Damage Plan instead of Panta. When they recorded the album Neuf Found Power, they were attempting to create something fresh. They had complete control over it, but it wasn't Panta 2.0. The brothers could express themselves freely with Damage Plan, free from the lingering issues that had been preventing them from doing so. They returned to the stage after their tour with the same level of vigor, but this time there was caution, fatigue, and a hazy sense of emptiness. A Damage Plan could never match Panta's quality. Vinnie was aware that their attempts to smile would not be sufficient to fill the voids in their hearts. That is, until Vinnie Paul's entire life collapsed one evening in December 2004. An armed man broke into the stage at the Al Rosavilla Bar in Columbus, Ohio, on the evening of December 8th. He shot and killed Dimebag Darrell in front of Vinnie's eyes as Damage Plan was playing. Nathan Gale, a former Marine with delusional paranoia, was the gunman who believed Dimebag had stolen his songs. He arrived that evening with the specific intention of assassinating a man who was admired by millions of people. Four victims were killed by the 15 rounds he fired. He didn't stop until a policeman rushed the stage and shot him dead. He was just a couple of feet away. For over 2 decades, his brother had been his singing partner and soulmate. On the stage where they had taken up residence, he witnessed him faint. There are no words to describe that level of suffering. Seeing his sister slaughtered on stage is never something a brother is prepared to witness. No guitarist can continue to play after witnessing something so terrible. Dimebag and Vinnie both lost a bit of their souls that night. He was no longer Panta's Vinnie Paul. Vinnie didn't reappear after Dime passed away. He rejected every opportunity to collaborate. Don't even speak to folks you were close to before. He remained solitary and only interacted with his family, his girlfriend Chelsea, and copious amounts of alcohol. To forget, not to get wasted. Vinnie returned to playing the drums after nearly 3 years. It wasn't with his brother this time, though. He was in the company of strangers. Hell sure, Vinnie was requested to join. This metal band was formed in 2006 by former members of Nothing Face and Mudvayne. He initially said no outright. He once remarked, "I have nothing left to play." After being prodded and encouraged, he eventually consented to try it once. Vinnie sobbed because he felt like he could breathe again for the first time since that awful night. Not because the music was good. Dimich was unlike anyone else. But now he was back behind Hellyeah's drums. He was perspiring, and only a stage performer truly understands the sensation of the bass and screaming in his chest. Definitely not Panta. It wasn't required. For Vinnie, it was a chance to start anew. Vinnie returned to the metal scene in 2007 with their debut album, but this time as a survivor rather than an icon. He then embarked on a tour with Hellyeah, released more records, and made an effort to lead a typical life. However, those who know him could tell, Vinnie never truly moved on from Dimebag's passing. He wore a ring with his brother's ashes on it all the time. The chair by his drum kit, where Dime used to sit, was never occupied. No one else could ever fill the void in his heart. He once declared, "I wouldn't be alive." Despite this, he continued to play, shout, laugh, drink, and live, bruised yet unbreakable. Vinnie Paul only knew how to get through hell in this way. Private life. Vinnie Paul was the epitome of unadulterated energy on stage. Drum beats that felt like blows hurled into the air, long hair falling over a radiant face, and an unwavering smile. Offstage, he was regarded as the life force of every gathering, a man with boundless vitality. Vinnie enjoyed creating noise, drinking, laughing, and ensuring that everyone around him had a good time. He was more than just Pantera's drummer in the metal community. The man behind the renowned all-night parties where beer, rock and roll, and fraternity merged into something sacred. He was the epitome of hospitality. The drink that he and Dimebag enjoyed the most was the emblem of that way of life. Like the music they played, the Black Tooth Grin was strong, dark, and sweet, a cross between Crown Royal and Coke. From Texas living rooms to backstage tour hangouts, the Black Tooth Grin was a means for Vinnie to honor his brother's memory, with each glass raised and a tribute to unbreakable brothers. However, the wine became a double-edged blade following Dimebag's passing, stoking his laughter while masking the stillness that no one was permitted to see. Vinnie was very quiet about his personal life, even though he attended almost all of the big parties. He had no children and was never married. He didn't do it because he didn't want to, but rather because his relationships with music and Dimebag were so strong that they didn't allow for anything else. He dated Chelsea Yerger, a model who was over 20 years his junior, for a long time. She was not merely a romantic partner. She was a modest friend who supported him during innumerable performances, sharing the stage time and the quiet backstage times. According to Vinnie, he didn't require a crowd, but he also didn't like being by himself. Whiskey, music, and memory were what he really needed. 3 things that have the power to either save or ruin you. He was the life of every party, but those who knew him remembered that. When he got back to his room, he would frequently sit by himself and either set out an empty chair next to his drum instrument for dim each or play old Panic cassettes in silence. For Vinnie, it was impossible to go past the suffering. Living with it was the only option. He originally had an idea to write a cookbook called Drumming Up an Appetite with Vinnie Paul, in which he would share his best recipes along with humorous and boozy backstage tales. The novel was never finished. It remained an incomplete plan, like a lot of things in Vinnie's life. A man who played drums all of his life, but who had a hole inside of him that no one could ever fill. A man who sat quietly through long, lonely nights despite having the power to shake thousands of followers to their core. Vinnie Paul was that person. A man who loved his deceased brother as though he were still standing next to him, guitar in hand, prepared to destroy the world once more, and who lived for music as if there were no tomorrows. Last year's, Vinnie Paul never once left the stage, despite being in his 50s and bearing a scar from Dimebag's passing that would never go away. He saw music as more than just a job. It was a way out. He had lost everything, and this was the only way he could live. Hell yeah. He kept putting out records, going on tour, and exhibiting the same tough attitude he had when he was a member of the Pantera, as though the tragic years had never occurred. Nevertheless, individuals started to notice something while the drums continued to thunder and the lights continued to shine. Vinnie was different. He continued to party, smile, and yell whenever he took the stage. But now there was a profound melancholy in his eyes, which had once been filled with endless life. Behind the well-known swagger was a man who had become more and more reclusive, more of a survivor than a fighter. Only Dimebag had ever been able to fill the void left by Vinnie's slight distance, even in the midst of the crowd. He seldom ever mentioned the past. Vinnie would evade questions about Pantera or Dimebag by responding with brief statements or a weak, odd smile. However, nobody held him accountable. Everyone comprehended. There are some hurts that must be faced in silence since talking about them would break them. Vinnie continued to live as though he were in a race against time at a time when many musicians choose to retire. Parties without interruption, countless studio sessions, performance after concert. His existence seemed to be pulsing in time with a drum beat that prevented him from stopping. However, his body was no longer able to match the eternal rocker's heart. Years of emotional and physical strain, coupled with age and an imbalanced lifestyle, ultimately started to wear them down. Vinnie Paul was discovered dead in his sleep at his Las Vegas residence on June 22, 2018. The reason was identified as significant coronary artery disease and dilated cardiomyopathy, a heart disorder that impairs the heart's capacity to pump blood. At the age of 54, he died quietly on a quiet night, without saying goodbye, without stage lights, without a drum solo. It was a change that was very different from his lifestyle. But after decades of living every day as if it were his last, it might have been the only way he could finally get some rest. In Arlington, Texas, in Moore Memorial Gardens Cemetery, Vinnie was buried next to Dimebag Darrell. The names of the two brothers are inscribed on two coffins that are placed next to each other, as if they had never been apart. Warriors who had collaborated to write groove metal's most magnificent chapter are now back together on the same planet. The world's metal community fell silent in sadness, yet there was no lavish celebration or open funeral. Anthrax, Slipknot, Lamb of God, Metallica, and other artists sent their respects. To bid farewell, thousands of followers brought candles, drumsticks, Panda shirts, and tattoos of black toothed grins to the cemetery. Vinnie Paul took a different route in the rock and roll industry, where superstars frequently come and go amidst controversy and commotion. Quiet, unwavering, and completely devoted to his late brother, music, and the principles he never compromised. His last years weren't a conclusion. Rather, they were a final declaration that, no matter what, he would continue to drum until his heart could no longer keep up. Impact and legacy. Vinnie Paul was neither the most intricate nor the fastest drummer. Additionally, he never tried to establish a point by flaunting his skill, but he developed his own vocabulary, a language of weight, accuracy, and the most primal instincts of heavy metal. With each blow, whether it was the slow, crushing pound of Walk or the machine gun blast of Becoming. Vinnie and Dimebag Darrell did more than simply give Pantera its soul. Groove metal is a whole new genre that he helped create. Grunge took over the radio during a period when thrash was dwindling and many metal bands were making concessions to stay in business. Driven by Vinnie's pounding drums, Panta stood erect, unyielding, and brought metal back to its savagery. Vinnie had an impact on the metal world not only via his music, but also by his lifestyle and ability to keep the flame going. He was the type of performer who never pretended to be famous, was always willing to give a fan a hug, share backstage tales like an old friend, and raise a drink with anyone following a performance. Because of his genuineness, he became a legend who only needed to be remembered rather than idolized. His influence was freely acknowledged by many of the following generation of drummers. Vinnie was cited as an inspiration by Chris Adler, Lamb of God, Joey Jordison, Slipknot, Jason Bittner, and Shadows Fall. Not just for his playing, but also for his command of space and ability to keep a groove in a genre that can quickly devolve into chaos. Vinnie did more than just play the drums. He served as the band's emotional conductor throughout the entire song, keeping them from disintegrating. The fact that he remained loyal to himself and his beliefs till the end was another indication of his legacy. He never cashed in on a Panda reunion, never followed trends, and never made himself change to appeal to the market. Vinnie never undervalued the true worth of being an artist. The community held Helen in high regard because he never gave up battling, despite the fact that he never achieved the heights of Panta. These days, Vinnie Paul's name isn't just associated with the best metal drummers. It is inscribed with a golden age. A time when musicians didn't need controversies to gain attention, shows didn't need laser lights, and heavy metal didn't need gimmicks. For every true metal fan, he was the foundation, the pulse, the primordial beat beneath their flesh. Don't ever think it's not worth it. Fight until you can't is more than simply a life motto. It's carved on a headstone next to Dimebag Darrell's grave at the Arlington, Texas cemetery. It's the whole life of Vinnie Paul, the man who, rather of using words to keep time for a generation, used drum beats that came from a heart full of fire and blood that never once gave up. Unlike a fading star, Vinnie Paul did not fade away. Like a last drum beat resonating into the shadows, he vanished. Real enough to be remembered forever, deep enough to haunt, and loud enough to awaken. He didn't require publicity, radio hits, or studios worth millions of dollars. His drum kit, a sibling with a guitar by his side, and a throng of yelling fans were all he ever needed. And for a life worth living, that was sufficient. Vinnie Paul followed a road that no one else could ever match. From assembling riffs in his father's garage to dominating the Billboard charts with Pantera and ultimately breaking into blood and tears in Columbus. Even at the expense of his youth, his family, and eventually his life, he was the epitome of devotion to music, to Dimebag, and to his own genuine self. How do you feel about Vinnie Paul's life? A voyage of suffering, fire, and unwavering determination. To you, what is his biggest contribution to history? Was it the live, boisterous spirit that never broke, the brotherhood that resisted death, or the unrelenting drum beats? Please leave your comments below, and remember to hit like and subscribe so that we can continue to take you on a journey through the timeless rock and metal titans.